Hello, and welcome to this event hosted by the Project Management Specialist Group. Just some housekeeping before we start. So it's a hybrid event, some people joining online and some of us here in the BCS London office. Our speaker, Adrian Dooley, will be speaking remotely this evening. So in the office, we have some members of the Proms G committee, and I'll manage the Q&A for Adrian. So for those joining remotely, please use the chat facility to make any comments or ask questions, and we monitor those as we go along. The session will be recorded, as Simon said, and uploaded to the past events page on the BCS website. So if you make a contribution you don't want to be in the final upload, please let us know. Please stay muted when you're not speaking, and there will be a Zoom poll online. For those in the office, we're not expecting a fire alarm test, so if the fire alarm sounds, we need to leave through the fire exits. And there's 3 of them, I think. So out of here, turn right to the rubber plant, left into the atrium of the building and out to Cocktail Avenue where you came in, or alternatively turn sharp left where the glass louvres are. There's a fire escape there. Alternatively, left here into the lounge, right and out of the corner. The toilets are out of here to the right, turn right at the rubber plant and then the corridor. There will be refreshments and an opportunity for networking after the presentation in the lounge. So today we have Adrian Dooley speaking to us. Adrian has a 45-year career in project management, originally in construction project management, but also in software development. And in 1984, Adrian founded the Projects Group, which was a consultancy and training organisation. And Adrian worked with blue chip companies such as Unilever, BT, EDF, Siemens. Adrian founded Project Manager Today magazine, is an executive council member of the APM and a non-exec director of the APM group. Adrian also created and is lead author of the Praxis Framework, which offers foundation and practitioner certification. So welcome, Adrian. Thank you for joining us this evening. And if you can share your slides, then we can hand over to you for your presentation.
Okay. That should appear any moment now, I think. I'm looking at the screen. There we go. All right, good evening, everybody. And thank you for inviting me to talk to you this evening. Obviously, the title of the presentation is Breaking Down the Barriers to the Implementation of Good Practice. So there's a couple of things I should start off clarifying about just the title of the presentation. Clearly, if we're going to break down barriers, there must be some barriers to break down. So the first few slides that I'm going to talk around this evening may seem like a rather random collection of anecdotes, quotes and data, but hopefully as the presentation proceeds, you'll see why I've pulled those various bits and pieces together to illustrate what those barriers actually are. The second thing is, obviously, I'm talking about good practice, and I much prefer to use that phrase rather than the one which is perhaps more frequently heard, which is best practice, simply because across the gamut of projects and project management, there is no one single best practice. There is only good practice, which is extracted from a whole range of different practices, depending on the context of the work that faces you. So I just have a thing about the term best practice. I don't like it. I try not to use it. I think it's misleading. And then finally, although I'm from Praxis Framework and I'd be using Praxis Framework to illustrate the approaches I'm going to talk about to break down these barriers, I think much of what I'm going to say, in fact, most of what I'm going to talk about, is hopefully applicable to whatever framework you're using to manage your projects. This is a generic problem Perhaps this framework is just something that we've tried to develop specifically to address those barriers, but you can use other frameworks are available to break them down. So let's start off with a trick question. I'm going to give you two lists of the reasons why projects fail. Now, you very quickly establish that they're identical, but there is a difference. There is an underlying difference. Those two lists, albeit with a bit of poetic license, I've made them look exactly the same. Those two lists come from very different sources. So at the end of the presentation, I'm going to give you the answer to the question, what's the difference? They're clear. There is a very important difference between them. And I would ask you to come up with some ideas, which you're more than welcome to put in the chat if you like, or ask me the question at the end of the presentation, just before I give you the answer. Give me some suggestions. So my second random slide is a quote I took from a conference I attended just over a year ago. And this was somebody who was sharing their experience of doing a project management apprenticeship. Now, what is important here is the second paragraph. This person felt that they did some standalone courses in project management, but they did nothing to change the way they managed projects. And she felt that the organization that had paid for that training didn't benefit from the investment. So my question to you this evening, and if we do this as a Zoom poll, at the end of it, I'll take your results and compare them to the same questions, but run in a different conference. So what I'd like you to ponder briefly is whether you've been on a course. Obviously, I'm talking about a management course here, not the sort of course where you perhaps go and learn some practical aspect of IT and then apply that quite quickly. This is about whether you've been on a management course, whether you think that you were able to apply the things that you'd learned very quickly after you've been on the course. And I say very quickly because research shows that the memory fades fast. You do these courses, you learn lots of stuff, and the stuff that you learn fades very quickly. So you need to start applying it soon after the course. So if you could give us an indication of whether you felt that it was easy to apply the management techniques you'd learned and therefore were of great benefit to the organization, or whether you found it more difficult and therefore the benefits to the organization were far less. So at the moment we have what 15 responses, and in the lead is modest benefits, closely followed by little or no benefit, difficult to apply. Easy with reasonable benefits in third place, and full application with good benefits is bringing up the rear. So I think if everybody who wants to participate has participated, I'm just going to make a note of those figures. 23, 44, 22, and 0. And I'll come back to those later and talk about them in the context of what other people have said to the same question. I have to say there's a certain symmetry to that, isn't there? 33, 44, 22. Not difficult to remember. Okay, so thank you very much for that. I'll come back to that later. Okay, I said there was a series of random slides. Here's the next one. It's a quotation from the Chief Information Officer for the Canada Treasury Board Secretariat. And he made a comment that has since become known as Cobb's paradox. And he said, we know why projects fail. We know how to prevent their failure. So why do they still fail? Now, whether you agree with that statement or not, it certainly is something that makes you think. We have a lot of good practice guidance out there. We have a vast amount of collective experience in the profession. We also, as I've already referred to, constantly see surveys explaining why projects fail and giving some awful, frightening figures on the percentage of projects that fail. So why is it all this experience, the decades of experience, don't result in the vast majority of projects succeeding? And here's the last of my collection of background nuggets. This is a small selection from a database of lessons learned obtained under Freedom of Information. So these are all central government, local government, and sort of government-related NGOs. But from my personal experience working with large corporates, those large corporates have lessons learned which say pretty much the same thing. So let's just think about this for a moment. These are people who are managing high-value projects using public money, and when they're asked what could we have done better, they make statements like, well, perhaps we should have involved some business stakeholders at the start. Perhaps we should have had a formal business case. Perhaps we should have planned communications and kept staff fully involved during the project. Now, for me, this is not rocket science. These are not true revelations. These are the kind of things that you would learn on the first morning of just about any basic project management course. So what this says to me is, it's very clear that good practice is simply not being applied. Maybe the problem, the answer to Cobb's paradox, is that not that we don't have the knowledge, not that we don't have the good practice, it's simply that we don't use it. So if we're not using it, what are the barriers? What's causing this problem? Now, as I said, I'm going to talk about these problems in the context of the practice framework and the tools and the approaches that we've taken. But I hope that you may, whatever approaches, methodologies, frameworks, guides, standards you may use within your organization, you can take something away this evening which will help you use those better. So I'm going to talk about 6 barriers. The first 2 are about content, i.e. the good practice itself. And the next 4 are about making use of that good practice, about getting it embedded in the organization. And the word I like to follow up embedding is habit. We need to make good practice a habit so that it doesn't become something we think about, it just becomes something we do, almost second nature. So I'm going to start off with the idea of integration. Now, you may recognize some of these book front covers. We have the APM's body of knowledge, which describes all the various functions that make up the discipline of project management. The PMI's version, the PMBOK guide, is a similar sort of document. We have methodologies from PRINCE and MSP, we have competence, and we have capability maturity at an organizational level. So just about every guide that you come across, every good practice guide, falls into one of these 4 categories. And this is the start of the problem, because they tend to be limited to one of those 4 categories. There isn't a lot of crossing those boundaries. They're very focused, a bit fragmented. They use different terminologies, different taxonomies, even guides that come from the same publisher that address different things, say projects as opposed to programs, don't necessarily use the same taxonomy and terminology, which can get very confusing. And this was a a situation I was very familiar with for 25 years while I was running a training and consultancy company. So what we did when I had the opportunity was to put together something that integrated all these different aspects, because I feel for organizational project management, you need all four of these. So what we did was to develop a body of knowledge. So there are certain little things that are somewhat different to the conventional ones, but to anybody who's familiar with the APM or the PMI's bodies of knowledge, this will be very familiar. So we created our own body of knowledge, and we created methods for project, program, and portfolio management, life cycle processes. What we did differently was to make sure that the language used in both the knowledge, the body of knowledge, and the methodology was exactly the same. We did the same thing with a competency framework and the same thing with a capability maturity model for the organization. So we ended up with 4 main sections, all of which use a single consistent terminology, a single taxonomy, and as you can see, it's on a website, so everything is hyperlinked to everything else. So as soon as you read about the identification process in the business case management page, you can click on the link and you go to the definition process. Along the top there, you've got the different tabs: knowledge, competence, capability. I'll talk about the others later. So you can switch between all the different aspects very quickly. And of course, any body of knowledge, any methodology will make lots of references to tools, techniques, models, once you start getting into the detail. So we put all those into an encyclopedia, which is, again, integrated with the others. So what I feel is that integration makes the whole system easier to use. You're not saying, well, I'm going to take this body of knowledge and this methodology and this competency framework and this maturity model, and I'm going to try and make them all work together for my organization. These are built from the ground up and they're consistent throughout. So that makes the whole thing work more simply. But of course, it's got to be accessible. We don't want to hide behind paywalls. We don't want to make it difficult to gain access to. So all of this information is available on a website and it's free. And you can see at the top of that diagram, the 5 sections: knowledge, method, competence, maturity, and the library, which includes the encyclopedia and a lot of other stuff as well. So it's accessible because it's on the web. But there's an awful lot of information. So we're constantly trying to come up with ways to make it more accessible and make it more relevant to different companies, different organizations, different projects. So one of the things, for example, that we did was to put together something that's called Praxis Local, which is a sort of a front end to the website. And we did it in PowerPoint with all the hyperlinks in, and created a PDF. Those can be downloaded from the website. And the point is that you can edit those. They can sit on everybody's PC as sort of an introductory PDF. And because you can edit it, you can link it to guidance which is internal. It's on your intranet, on your internal servers, and you can put the links in there alongside the relevant stuff from Praxis. We've included the full range of Praxis functions and processes, but if you think, well, that one doesn't apply to us, you just delete that and you add in something which is relevant to you. So again, this is about making it as relevant and accessible as possible. We're aware that there are many standards out there that you might want to adhere to. There's a relatively new one. I think it's been around a couple of years now. But the Government Functional Standard, GovS 002, is it's put forward as the government standard approach to project management, or project delivery to be precise. The government term for projects, programs, and portfolios all rolled together is project delivery. And this was one of the first standards that actually rolled together projects, programs, and portfolios, which is a great opportunity for us, because obviously the framework that we put together addressed all three of those. So you've got one central, I think it's about 40 pages, so it's more of a policy document level. And what we were able to do is to say, well, the Praxis framework addresses every aspect of this government standard. So if you want to go to the next level down, what we've done is produce a document that says, here's the government standard, here's the detail that supports it. But then, of course, not everybody wants to use a website. People actually like to thumb through a book. They like to make notes in the margin. They like to flip through the pages. So we worked with the stationery office to produce the book, which is simply there as an alternative. We're trying to make sure that whatever approach you want to take, the information is there available. I'd like to say the stationery office give it away for free, but obviously they can't do that. As a slight aside here, we first put, the first website we launched was in 2014. So we're coming up to nearly 10 years now. And one of the things that surprised us, when you put something out there for free, the first thing people say is, well, if it's free, it can't be worth having. If it's free, it can't be any good. Well, of course, you know, the web's free, Wikipedia's free, Linux is free. There's so many things that are given away for free on the internet that people started to accept that maybe actually this did have some value. And then what happens is people come along and say, no, if you're going to give this away for free, then that inspires us to help to give stuff away for free. It inspires us to do work to enhance it. So that screenshot is actually a little bit out of date. We've got Spanish, French, Indonesian, Italian, Dutch, and Chinese. We've now also got Portuguese and German, with other translations in the offering. And these translations have all been done by people freely giving of their time all over the world to do these translations. So it starts to bring people together who want to contribute. We want it to be a community-driven exercise. And the latest one that we're working on is a project with a company called Method Grid, who actually produce something which is going to be far more sophisticated than Praxis Local, but effectively does the same thing. And we're hoping to launch that a little later this year. So we integrate all the good practice, and we make it as available and relevant and tailorable, like, as possible. So we overcome those initial barriers of adopting the good practice. But we recognize that if you're trying to do this at an organizational level, it's not just about individuals, it's not just about teams, it's not about the organization as a whole, it's about all of those levels. And what we're in the process of putting together, because as I said, people come up with new ideas all the time. So we're constantly able to add to the portfolio of tools that we have to help people along. What we try to do is to make sure that these tools are multi-purpose. They work for the individual, they work for the team, and they work for the organization as a whole. So you might say that's integration, but of a different dimension. So the things that I'll talk about in the next few slides, the tools that we provide, hopefully you'll see that these are applicable at multiple levels, so that you get the greatest efficiency. So now we're coming on to the, so I'm just making sure I've got the chat up in case anybody has any questions. Yes, sorry, Enrico, you asked if we have any intention to look at large language models in the near future. That's a very timely question, because I talked about the fact that we're working with this company called Method Grid, who put together playbooks or process-based playbooks. It's not purely about project management, it's about any process-based function like health and safety or quality and so on. But they do a lot of work in project management. And they are building AI into their application. And just as a taster, they sent me the other day, they produced a video explainer about one aspect of Praxis. And this was a presentation with a person in the bottom left-hand corner giving an explanation of what the different slides were about. And I'm told that took less than 2 hours to produce. They got AI to write the script. They then got AI application to generate the avatar, to speak the script, and generate the slides alongside. So the simple answer to your question is yes. And I'm no expert in LLMs. I'm no expert in AI, but I am very impressed by what other people are doing with it. And so pleased that people are attracted to Praxis as a community-driven, free enterprise to then contribute what they're doing to make it even better. So thank you for that question. Back to my slide, Monday morning. Now, I can't see all your faces to see any wry smiles, but certainly when I do this presentation face-to-face, and I talk about the fact that many people go on courses, study hard for a week, possibly take an exam on the Friday afternoon, go home, have a good weekend, and then Monday morning go back to doing everything the way they always did before, I usually get a lot of wry smiles from people who seem to recognize what I say. This is a fundamental problem. We can deliver knowledge, we can get people to absorb knowledge. The fact that there are associated certifications and exams focuses people's minds to retain that knowledge. But as I said, the retained knowledge fades quite quickly. Even over the course of the 2-day weekend, some of it will have faded. If you don't start using it on the Monday, and I am being slightly metaphorical here, I appreciate that you've got a lot of emails to catch up on Monday morning. But if we don't start using it quite quickly, then you use it or you lose it. The knowledge starts to fade. And eventually it just doesn't get applied. And that week, that hard week you spent is a waste of time and money. So how do we get over this? How do we help people start applying this on a Monday morning? I would relate this a little bit with another wry smile to something else I have some experience of, which is weight loss. I was once asked if I knew how to lose weight, and my reply was, well, yeah, you eat less and move more. Knowing how to do it is very simple. Actually doing it is a different game altogether. Actually applying that discipline to eat less and move more can be quite difficult. And that's why people do things like go to Weight Watchers, because there are people there to help them do it. So how can we help people actually apply this? Well, there's lots of stuff you can do within your organization, but what can we as a good practice organization offer? Well, what we've done is implement a load of checklists. And I suspect when I say checklists and show you this form, a little bit dies on the inside. Oh no, checklists, box ticking, I hate this stuff. Well, we got inspiration for this from a book called The Checklist Manifesto. I can't recommend this book highly enough. It's not a massive book. It's a relatively short book, and it's a good read. It's well written, and there's lots of humor in it, even though it's dealing with a very serious subject. That subject is post-operational surgical mortality. And it tells the story of Atul Gawande, the author, who's a surgeon in America, who was asked by the World Health Organization to come up with ways to reduce post-surgery mortality. I'll cut this very short because if you want to know, read the book or look up Atul Gawande on YouTube doing a TED talk. What he was able to do with a set of checklists, which are now, I'm told, standard practice within the NHS, was to reduce surgical mortality worldwide by 40%. Now, project management is rarely a matter of life or death. This was a matter of life or death, literally. And with some simple checklists, which are used at the beginning of every surgical operation, mortality was reduced by 40%. So there are a lot of people today out there who are alive and able to read this, who wouldn't have been if checklists hadn't been in place at the beginning of their the beginning of their surgery. So although it's boring, although it's dreary and, oh, I've got to fill in a checklist, it works. None of you, I suspect, would get on an aeroplane to fly off on holiday if the pilots hadn't been through their pre-flight checklist. Even 96% of surgeons said they would now not want to be operated on unless they knew the surgical team had been through their pre-operational checklist. So what we've done is to say, okay, you've been and learned about stakeholder management on your course. Well, at some point in the following week, just call up this checklist and run through it to see if you're actually doing the things that the course suggested you should be doing. Let's go back to those lessons learned reports that I put up right at the beginning. You know, you don't want to get to the end of the project and write a lessons learned report that says, yeah, we should have spoken to our stakeholders at the beginning. And what we then did with these checklists was to make them 360. So as well as the project manager filling them in, the stakeholders can fill them in as well. And you can get a report that says, effectively, well, you as project manager think you are the bee's knees of stakeholder management. You've ticked agree with everything. But actually your stakeholders don't entirely agree. So perhaps you ought to check with them how they perceive the stakeholder management that you're doing. It's important that not only do we apply discipline to what we're doing, but we understand how that affects other people. So these checklists is not just for me in the morning to say, yeah, I've done that, I've done that, I've done that, and I'm great. It's for me to to facilitate organizations with other people. So I might think, yeah, I'm great at risk management. My team might be filling in the same form and saying, I'm not so sure it's going so well on this project. Okay, well, let's talk about it. I'm not trying to catch people out here. I'm just trying to make sure that the team and the broader team of stakeholders, sponsor, all have a common view of how things are going on the project. You know, let's put egos aside. If surgeons can put their egos aside to do checklists with everybody in a surgical team, then surely we as project managers can put our egos to one side and understand how our team and the people around us believe this project is going. Now, long-term development. As a trainer, I noticed, Steve, you commented on the Monday morning syndrome. As a trainer, you dread getting scheduled for Friday.
That's right.
The question that trainers often get asked is, okay, I've done my practitioner, what happens next? And very often there isn't an answer. And if I'm maybe seems cynical, but I think I'm being honest here, the reason there often isn't anything after practitioner is that there's no money in it. For the organizations that offer certifications beyond practitioner, there aren't the numbers to make it worthwhile. So everything seems to stop at practitioner level. Let's just review what those levels are. The terms are not universal, but they are very commonly used, and I think, I hope that many of you will recognise them. Foundation, you know the language, you know the terminology, so you can converse with other people. But that's really as far as it goes. Practitioner is you can demonstrate that you can apply the knowledge in artificial environments. So you're given case studies, you're given questions, and you have to say how you would respond in that situation. So in theory, you know how to do it. But as they say, there's a big difference between theory and practice. Now, you've seen me touch on some of the things that we try to do to help you practice the things that you've learned, to apply, to embed, to make good practice a habit. I've talked about things like Praxis Local, the accessibility, the relevance. I've talked about the checklist to get everybody on the same page about how well things are going. And that bottom graphic there with the 4 colours, I'll come to that shortly. But the point here is that we try to build tools that help people once they've shown that they know how to apply the knowledge and turn that into actual application. In terms of certification, if that's what you want, then once you've applied it, you've got the scars, you've got the t-shirt, you can have a one-to-one with somebody and demonstrate that you've been there and you've done it, and you get a professional certification. And this has all been checked and approved by the Association for Project Management. And if you achieve Praxis Professional, then you simply have to have a conversation with an assessor from the APM to commit to their continuing professional development and the code of ethics, and you're a chartered project professional, which is, in my view, the peak of the profession. That says this is a person who has been there, done it several times, has a lot of experience, and can competently manage projects. And a lot of the stuff we're talking about that people don't do, to them is second nature. That's what they do. So it's about the long term. It's about giving people that starter knowledge, about priming the pump, then giving them the tools to apply it, and then coming back and saying, okay, have you applied it? Tell us how you applied it. There's the seal of approval. You're a chartered project professional. And I know I'm whipping through these fairly quickly, but there's a lot of them to cover. So I'm happy to address questions as they come. And I would also say, sort of preempt my final slide. If anybody wants to contact me on LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn, I'm always happy to have conversations with people who want to know more, or just discuss views. And as is often the case, tell me I'm absolutely wrong, which are always the most interesting conversations for me, because I learn a lot. Now, you may or may not have come across something called DISC. It's a personality profiler, and whatever you think about personality profilers, they can sometimes be a blunt instrument, but that doesn't mean they're not useful. This is DISC, I'm told, is the most popular by far personality profiler. I get told off if I call it a psychometric assessment, because I'm told it's not. I'm not clear on what the difference is, but I'll just stick with personality profile. You may not necessarily recognize it at DISC because a lot of the products that use it don't make reference to DISC. They just use the research, they use the book that it's based on, and then they build a tool around that and promote it. So anyway, we looked at this because somebody came along to me and said, well, I really like Praxis, but one of the things that's missing is missing in all good practice. And that is that not everybody looks at it the same way. Not everybody reads that information. So 4 people can read identical information about risk management and internalize it in a very different way, act upon it in a very different way, depending on their personal preferences. And that made perfect sense to me. It was sort of, well, yeah, why didn't I think of that before? It's obvious when somebody puts it to you like that. So what I did was to work with this chap called Donny McNichol, and we looked at all the key functions within the framework, and we said, well, how would somebody who was primarily conscientious look at this? How would somebody who was primarily dominant look at it? Somebody who's steady, somebody who's influential. And one of the things that really struck a chord with me was that obviously the first thing we did was to try this on ourselves. Donny is a yellow, a high yellow. He's the influential type. I'm a red, dominant type. So I just want to get on with it. You know, yes, you've convinced me this is a good idea. I've made my decision. It's good. Let's do it. Whereas he is, yeah, but I want to talk about it more. I want to talk to more people about it. I want to collect more information about it before I put pen to paper. No, Donny, come on. You know, this is a great idea. Let's just do it. And that potential conflict was there straight away. But although, as I say, this is a blunt instrument, just looking at this made me think, okay, I understand where he's coming from. He understands where I'm coming from. Let's find the middle road. Let's work out how we can both be happy with what we produce and the time scale in which we produce it. So we worked through all these topics. We did questionnaires with people. We did some interviews, and we came up with ideas about how these different personality profiles view each aspect of project delivery. Just for the sake of it, here's my profile. So my natural personality is on the left. So I'm a very high red. I've also got some conscientious, detailed traits, and the I and the S tend to be low. When I answer the questionnaire and I'm thinking about the situations in which I apply these, then it would appear I push the I and the S even further back and focus very much on the red and the blue. I am more task oriented than I am people oriented in my work. And that doesn't mean to say I'm bad or I'm wrong. It just means that's me. And actually, it's great to work with somebody who has a completely different profile, because between us, I think we came up with a good solution. And the same is true of project management. You know, we can provide you with these reams and reams of good practice. We can get individuals to fill in the checklists to make sure they're doing it. But all the people in the team view these things in different ways. Imagine if you've got a high red project sponsor and perhaps a high yellow project manager, there's going to be some conflict there. But that needs to be productive conflict, and it becomes productive by those two people understanding their contrasting points of view. So it helps an individual understand other people and their perspective, and it understands the whole. It helps the whole team understand that there are these different perspectives on what appears to be a single common good practice. But no, it's perceived differently, and we have to work together. That's why the checklists are 360, because that also brings out these differences. And both of these things act as a catalyst to help people come together and understand different points of view so that they can collectively work as a team to deliver the project. So how can we leverage these tools for other purposes? Well, the other aspect I want to talk about is organizational capability maturity. Because we want, if we invest in the individuals, we train the individuals, and we provide the individuals with the tools and the space and the encouragement to actually embed these good practices, it's got to be to the benefit of the organization. Now, I know it's difficult to work with empirical data on every project and say, this project was a success. 6 months later, we've been implementing this framework and now all these projects are successful. Because the idea of success and failure are difficult to pin down. Lots of academics talk about what is project success, and nobody's come up with a common measure. It's very often a perception. Success is in the eye of the beholder. But organizational capability maturity is a good parallel for that. If we are increasing our organizational maturity, it is highly likely, and there is research to indicate that it does mean that our projects are being delivered much more successfully. So I go back to those checklists again. The checklist is, here's the good practice that you need to do once you've been on the course. Well, if we structure that checklist in a way which is also measuring the level of capability maturity with which the function is being applied, then we can produce a reply to the questionnaire that says, and I'm sure a lot of you won't be able to read the text on that, but this is basically a report. So you fill in the checklist and then you click on report, and it tells you you have achieved capability level for stakeholder management on this project of 1. So you're at level 1 for capability and stakeholder management. But you've also achieved some level 2 attributes. So here are the things you need to do to get to the next level. So you need to document your stakeholders' interests and influence. You need to have an organizational policy for stakeholder management. And if you do those things, you get to level 2. From an organizational point of view, if you've got individuals working on their projects who are doing their checklists, helping themselves and their teams by implementing the good practice, in the background, you're building a picture across the organization. So you can consolidate projects into programs. You can consolidate programs and projects into portfolios. And in effect, what you have is a real-time dashboard of growing maturity within the organization. You can put all your projects in there, all your programs in there, and provided people have the discipline to actually use these checklists to good effect, you can see on a day-to-day basis how organizational capability maturity is improving. And I see that as being a far more cost-effective, a far more flexible, nimble, and with some trepidation, I'll use the word agile. It's a far more agile way of developing your organizational maturity. The traditional approach is people come in, they do a survey, they do interviews, they produce an extensive, expensive consultant's report that says, hey, you're at level 1. Your projects aren't being run terribly well. Well, as the chief executive, a chief executive baroness once put it to me, and please pardon the language because I'm quoting her literally, she said, I know we're shit at running projects. Why do I need an assessment to tell me that? So let's not go the big assessment, big program of improvement, and then a second assessment. Let's just help people apply the good practice. And the maturity is almost a byproduct of that. There's no additional cost. You just invest in people spending a bit of time to apply the good practice, which is why you sent them on the training courses in the first place. And then you will see organizational maturity improving on that real-time dashboard. Okay, well, I am actually nearing the end now. So let's just go back to this slide of the 2 failure surveys. I don't know if anybody'd like to put in the chat what they think the difference between them might be. The sort of suggestions I've had in the past are things like, well, maybe one list is from the construction industry, another one's from the IT industry. Maybe it's UK versus US. Maybe it's Agile versus Waterfall, or Prince versus PMBOK. I see the suggestions are flooding in, not. So I'll give you the answer. The answer is very simply, thank you. or a couple. Now, the answer is this: 50 years. The first survey I came across of reasons why projects fail was from the IPMA, International Project Management Association conference of 1972. Although in those days they weren't called IPMA, for reasons which dyed-in-the-wool project managers will understand. The International Project Management Association was called Internet. They didn't trademark that name, and they came up with something else, IPMA, because somebody else then started using the word internet. 50 years later, we see multiple releases of surveys of why projects fail. And yes, I've doctored them a little bit so that they're two identical lists, but fundamentally they say the same thing. So in the perception of people who do surveys on project failure, nothing has changed in 50 years. As Douglas Adams very eloquently put it, we as a species are unique in having the ability to learn from the experience of others, and remarkable for our disinclination to do so. I don't know why we don't do it, but we don't. So, the poll. From memory, we had about 17 responses. Oh, thank you. Yeah, 18 responses. And we had 33, 44, 22. Well, I did this in a different context. And the result was this. Now, just for ease of doing the maths, this one, between the first two, little or no or some modest benefits, that turns out at 80%. Whereas the one we've just done today is 77%. And if we add easy application, reasonable benefits, full application, very good benefits, that one, previous one, adds up to 20. So Pareto is alive and well in application of project management good practice. It was an 80-20 split, and in today's survey, it's a 77-23 split. So consistent, to say the least. Hopefully, that means you'll agree with me that there is a problem here. There are barriers. We do have lots of good practice. We have a vast amount of good practice. And I think a lot more projects succeed than pollsters would have us believe. And there are a lot of really good practitioners out there who share their experience. And what we have to do is to try and get people to apply that. As I say, it is like losing weight. It's very easy to know. It's a simple concept that you eat less and move more. It is a very difficult, very different, and sometimes difficult thing to actually apply those simple principles. There's always that tempting piece of cake in the larder. There's always a shower of rain when you should be going for a walk or a run. So there's always excuses not to do it. There's always other stuff that gets in the way. We need that discipline to apply good practice. If I can just bring one of my other interests into this, that illustrates it as a parallel in real life. I've watched an awful lot of rugby in my time. I'm sure it's exactly the same for any sport. But if you go to a live match and you are watching the best players in the world, they will all do the same thing before they start playing the match. They will go out and they will go through very basic routines. Routines that kids who've just started and want to be the best players in the world find really boring and tedious, and they don't want to do them. But they are exactly the ones that the best players in the world do, and they do them time and time again. Muscle memory, habit. It's because they've developed those ingrained habits that they're able to improvise on the pitch. and do the really clever stuff. You've got to get the simple stuff right first. So there you go. 1928. So hopefully just about on the hour. So thank you everyone for your perseverance and your stamina in listening to me going on about a subject which hopefully you can see I'm quite passionate about. There's the website. There's my email, and I love to connect with people on LinkedIn, because not only can we have conversations, but my Avazet, I take your point. Sport is predictable. No match is predictable. If matches were predictable, we'd all be millionaires. No two projects are the same. No two matches are the same. But the basic skills, the generic skills, are exactly the same. And what you have to do is to adapt those and ad-lib on the basic foundation to be an expert, to be a world-class player. So yeah, if we connect on LinkedIn, happy to have conversations, but what it also means is I get to see what you like and what you share, and that broadens my knowledge of the whole field of project management. So thank you once again, and I guess I should stop sharing now, so that we can, whoops, there we go. So we can deal with any questions that arise.
Any questions from the floor here?
Well, just one, say half an observation, but it goes into a question as well, which is that why that Friday afternoon, Monday morning, brought that home to me was one course, which is how you should do things better. And it was actually over several months. And between one of them, it was things that you want to do better. How many hours a week are you spending doing this? And me personally, I'm a senior project manager, program manager. How many hours a week am I managing projects? And it's probably 5. And the reason for that is all the other stuff. And I could take something from this and say, yeah, I'm going to apply that tomorrow. But it's the organization. So the project is moving at a certain speed. I can control that with experience, especially you can control it. And then there's the organizational must-haves, the politics. You can't control that. That's like a speeding train. How much can you control that? And it also goes the other way, which is organizations send you on training courses. They want you to apply it. Then you get back Monday morning, and it's not through your lack of trying. It's everything else takes over. And then you get to the why do projects fail? And it's, yeah, you know these things. That list of things could be a day one on a project as risks. It's how do you manage those? You get a bit of that over experience, and then how much time do you have to do that? So the sort of question there is, it's also turn it round. How can you apply it if the sort of organization sends you on something, or you know that's what to do, but your sphere of influence is small?
Yeah, I take your point very well. I think one of the points I made was this doesn't work unless you take it at those 3 levels: individual, team, and organization. And one of the things that I hope will help make a difference is that if you take the checklists, for example, the multiple purposes of those checklists, yes, it helps the individual apply what they've learned. Secondly, it helps the team express their different views on how well the project is being managed. But thirdly, it gives the organization as I say, this real-time dashboard of how the management of your projects is improving. So hopefully, now I know it's not an ideal world, but we have to give it our best shot. Hopefully, some of the powers that be in the organization will be swayed by the fact that if they want this real-time view of the improving delivery of projects in their organization, they've got to give people the time to do these checklists. They've got to give them the time to say, well, I'm not doing, the 4th item on the checklist. I can't say, yes, we're doing that. So I've got to start doing it. And if I don't start doing it, we're not going to get to level 2. And if my project doesn't get to level 2, your program isn't going to get to level 2. And if your program doesn't get to level 2, your portfolio won't get to level 2. And if you're not at level 2, you're wasting a hell of a lot of money on the management of your projects and programs. So it's a simple argument, but in some ways it's so simple. It's difficult for senior executives to take on board. But yeah, we have to address these issues at all levels in the organisation.
Any more questions from the floor? I think.
I'll always ask questions on these kind of things. It was kind of just taking on the argument around the Monday morning lists. Is that it in terms of the framework and the kind of approach, or are there more things to it than that? So basically, I'll go back on the train and I'll be going, right, let's have a look into it in a bit more detail and see how to apply that. Literally this Monday coming. I've got a colleague here who will probably laugh at it, but I'm quite serious. It's the practical application side of it is the bit I'm most interested in, and we can talk about lessons learned and those kind of things. Is there more to what you're talking about than the lists on the Monday afternoon and et cetera, during the course of the week? Or is it the cadence? Is it the strategy that kind of sits behind it? That's the bit I'd probably like to elaborate a bit more, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think there's an awful lot more to it than a set of checklists. As, you know, I hope it came across that they're just part of the bigger picture, a piece of the jigsaw. They are just the mechanism for helping to apply the discipline. But you know, the fact that they're 360, the fact that we've got this way of looking at the functions and the processes depending on your personality type, the fact that we have got this live picture of how the training is being implemented. So, you know, you can put it a different way. Do you want to know the return on investment on your training? Well, if you start to see your maturity increase, that clearly demonstrates that you're getting a return on that investment. So yeah, the checklists are, and they're the one that people home in on, because you either love them or you hate them. They're a very Marmite thing. So people do tend to focus on those, but really they're just one piece of the jigsaw. Let's say it's got to be at all levels in the organisation. You've got to recognise that these barriers exist, and people have to appreciate that they might sign off a budget for training, but they've effectively got to sign off a time budget to help people actually use the knowledge that they've gained. And as I say, hopefully what we're doing is we're giving some tempters to people at an organisational level through the dashboard to encourage them to sign that off for the individuals and the teams. Yeah, as I say, I'm not suggesting this is simple any more than if you turned up at Weight Watchers, they would say, yeah, losing weight's simple. You know, they provide you with a support infrastructure that helps you apply the difficult discipline. And that's what we're trying to do. We can't provide the tools. You've got to provide the enthusiasm, the discipline, and the commitment. We can't do that for you. So yeah, checklists are just one small part of the big picture.
There's a question in the chat from Steve Carroll. Steve, if you can unmute.
Hello. I'll try a video as well, but I've got very poor broadband where I am. Hi there.
Hi.
Yeah, I was just saying that this resonates very well with me, because I developed my own company to train organizations how to be more successful in project management, rather than organizations just sending the project managers on project management training because they're like 10% at best of the project's effort. But for me, it's always about working with companies. It's the follow-up coaching that consolidates that learning and teaching people habit. I call them nags because it's just slightly funny. But when I talk about my nags, I talk about actually the habits that people can form. But to me, sending people on training courses, whether it's Friday's dreadful, but even if it's a Monday, you send people on a training course. When they come back, they're busy for the whole week. It's that follow-up coaching and actually saying let's apply it in something real rather than a case study where people realize actually they didn't learn it quite as well as they thought they did, but then they start to. And I just wondered if that's your experience.
Definitely. You need, various organizations do this in different ways. Some might do it through a PMO, others have centers of excellence. My next presentation, it's not really a presentation. There's a large government organization who've asked me to do a sort of a lunchtime thing, which is about creating community. They have a project management community, so we're going to have a bit of fun with a few bits and pieces to get that community pulling together. I think there's about something like 100 people there dealing with a particular program of projects. So yeah, you have to have this infrastructure in place that starts to transfer knowledge. Praxis can present you with a large amount of knowledge, but you need the peer knowledge as well, the implicit knowledge as well as the explicit knowledge. And again, I'm not saying it's the only solution you need, but again, hopefully, things like the 360 aspect of the checklists and team praxis with knowing different people's preferences. I'm hoping what that does is act as a catalyst to get people to talk. So, okay, you're my project sponsor, I'm the project manager. We have a difference of opinion over how benefits management is being managed. So why do we have that difference of opinion? What's your experience? Help me understand. Hopefully the project sponsor is somebody who's been there and done it before and can help me out with that. And if again the mindset within the organization is that we don't want people to just go on a course and do a foundation or even a practitioner. We want to get them to the point where they're a professional and a chartered professional. So we help them through that process. And yes, there's some tools that we're giving you that help do that, but the organization's got to be there backing it up. So I completely agree with what you say.
Thank you, Adrian.
Any more questions from the floor here?
I've got one.
David?
Yes. Thanks, by the way, Adrian. I love the way it flowed through.
Thank you.
As long as everybody does what you said, we're fine.
Simple as that.
One thing I did like was the reference to sport, actually, because I think that's a good illustrator for a lot of the things that you're trying to do. For instance, I'm a great football fan, and I'm missing a big game tonight to come here.
What's that?
It's the I'm sure you know. But anyway, there's a set of rules for a game, aren't there?
Yes.
And all those rules aren't followed in the same way by each of the teams, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
But also the other thing which is interesting is that they only play games, I know, once or twice a week, and a lot of the other time is actually training to do it better. So I think there's a great comparison with what project management is trying to do. So I think that's a good way of illustrating it.
Was it to say, I've been close to the touchline in international games where you're within touching distance of these people who you see on the TV and are icons of the sport. And they come out and the first thing they do is practice the most basic techniques. They've probably been doing it all week, but they still do it. And I think, that's a lesson for all of us is you can't always be a superstar. You've got to spend a lot of time practicing and embedding those basic techniques. So just look at people that play snooker or golf. I'm told the top snooker players, they're practicing 10 hours a day. golf players, they're constantly having their swing analysed. Now I know, that's perhaps I'm stretching the analogy too far. But really what I'm trying to draw out of this is the discipline to do the tedious work. And I don't think as project managers we are exempt from that. We have to have the discipline to do the tedious stuff. And once we embed that, and once we make that a habit, then we can ad lib and we can do the really clever stuff. And that's where I'd like us to get to.
Any more questions?
To what extent do you think this is just about time? Because it sounds like a lot of this sounds like time management. Would love to apply it, but go back to work and I don't have the time. The organisation would love to do it, but can only afford to send their project managers on a course like this or something like that. Do you think it's an element of time management needs to go into some of these courses to create the space?
Yes, although what I'm trying to do is to say that however long it is, the week's course, yes, you're taken out of your environment and you're not working. Well, you probably are, but in theory, you're out, you're on the course, you're not working that week. Then you're back and you're working again. What I'm trying to say is that when you start working again, do it in a way that applies what you've learned previously. Otherwise, what on earth was the point of going out and going on the course? Now, I don't think anybody would not agree with that. There is absolutely pointless spending time and money going on a course if you're not going to actually use it. Now, I'm not saying that when you come back into work and you start applying that good knowledge, you're still doing the job. You're just doing it in a more effective way. Now, of course, there's a difference between effectiveness and efficiency. And as you start to become more effective, some might think you become less efficient because you can do, in a certain space of time, you can do more things badly than you can do than you can do rightly, if that's a word. So yes, you may start off by being a bit slower, a bit more thoughtful, a bit more careful. As I say, you look at those lessons learned reports at the start of the presentation. It would have been a good thing if we'd had a business case or we'd spoken to the stakeholders. Well, surely somewhere along the line, we've got to make time to do those things. Otherwise, I won't be here in 50 years' time, but somebody will put up 2 lists of reasons why projects fail and say, what's the difference? And it'll be 100 years. We either do something about it or we just stick with the status quo and carry on with projects failing. I don't have magic answers. I can just try to help make it work for some people who are prepared to not only come to the water, but to actually drink.
One thing that is in the gift of the project manager is to try and build in some time for some of these activities to be done in a more effective way. Certainly for the team and hopefully for him or herself as well. I know there's pressures from above to bring things in quicker and quicker and quicker, but sometimes the project manager has to dig his or her heels in and say, look, to do this properly, you need to give us time to learn these lessons and move forward.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. It's simple, but it's not easy.
I was wondering, Adrian, you have an established methodology in your organisation. A number of people train you, Prince2, for example. I mean, how does it work? How would it work in that sort of circumstance?
Well,
bringing
obviously sorry, John. I thought. Sorry, did you finish the question, or was it
in adopting the framework? Where you've already got something that's reasonably established.
Well, when we put Praxis together, I won't go into the political history of it, but I've been close to OGC, CCTA, APM, sort of worked with them for many years. So when I felt the only way to resolve the problems that I saw in the profession was to start with a blank sheet of paper, it wasn't entirely blank because, as I say, there's a lot of good practice out there. There's no point in rewriting it. There's no point in reinventing the wheel. So the knowledge section in Praxis and the method section in Praxis, the first will be very, very familiar to people who are familiar with the APM body of knowledge, and the other one will be very familiar to people who know about Prince and MSP, now owned by Axelos PeopleSearch. So that good practice is still there. I think we improved on it, not by coming up with new ways of managing projects, but by harmonizing the terminology, by simplifying the language. And then, as I say, we put the checklists and the team Praxis personality things and the capability maturity in there. But if you filled in one of those checklists, it wouldn't make any difference whether you were a Prince practitioner or an APM PMQ or a Praxis practitioner. The questions are not dependent upon the framework. They're general questions about good practice in project management. There might be a little bit of terminology. If you were a Prince practitioner, the process names are different. Well, we couldn't duplicate the process names. And in any case, we wanted the process names to be consistent across projects and programs. But between Prince and MSP, they're not consistent between those two. So we couldn't copy either of those. So the fundamentals, the underlying skeleton of good practice will be very familiar to people who've studied any other framework. I hopefully a lot of what we've put into Praxis will still be useful to people, even if they're not adopting it wholesale.
I also wondered if you have already started with other certifications. Maybe you've got your Prince 2 or your MSP. Is there any kind of way of gaining credit in Praxis certification?
Yes, there is. We have partners who deal with. I deal with the stuff that we give away for free. But we have partners who do the paid for services. Obviously, certifications are a paid for service, and that's handled by APM Group. And they have a bridging certification which says, right, if you're a Prince practitioner, you just need this short update, and then you can become a Praxis practitioner. And the reason for going from a Prince practitioner to a Praxis practitioner would simply be that you're sort of shifting across to the Praxis path, which then enables you to go through to Chartered Project Professional. Because Prince and MSP certifications stop at practitioner. Once you've got practitioner, you can do it in theory, but there's nothing after that. So if you want to move on to a pathway that goes through to professional and Chartered Project Professional, then you just need to do this bridging course and a test which moves you across to the other path.
Thank you.
I have a question regarding checklists and organizational maturity.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you implement checklists? Would that come from a top down or bottom up sort of attitude?
Well, I think, again, I'm hoping you can do both. In an ideal world, well, no, I'm not. I'm going to retract that. In an ideal world, let's just say in the real world, if you do something from the bottom up, then the people at the top, if they catch wind of it, might not be very happy because it hasn't been handed down from the top. If you hand it down from the top, the people at the bottom aren't very happy because it's being handed down from the top. So you can't win, basically. But what we've what we've done is to say, you can tackle this, you know, as far as practice is concerned, because we're not sitting there looking over your shoulder, telling you what to do, or telling the people at the top of the organization what to do. We're just providing you with the tools, which hopefully you can apply in a way that best suits your organization. So the checklists are there for anybody to use. So, and it doesn't matter if you adhere to praxis, whether you have done any certification practice. Everybody watching this call could tomorrow morning could log in. Well, you don't actually have to log in. You could just go to the website and do a checklist as a guest. Or if you wanted to create an account and log in, it then stores the results and builds up a picture for a project as a whole. But anybody can go in, pick any checklist and start filling them in to get a feel for how well their project is performing, and get the report that says you're at level 1, you're at level 2, these are the things you need to do to get to level 3. So from the bottom up, people can start using that to help them embed their knowledge and see how well they're doing. They can invite their colleagues, their sponsor, their team members, their stakeholders to fill in the same form to get a view. Now, I don't think you're going to have to ask for permission to do that. This is about you trying to become a better project manager. This is about you trying to get a better result on your project. So it doesn't depend on it coming from the top down. If that works, the word will spread. Other people will start doing it and looking at it. If people think this is producing some results, and here you are, here's my before and after, you can see how things improved for the team after we did this for a couple of weeks. Then people at the top can say, oh, actually, yeah, that's quite useful. And you're saying we can do this across the organization. And I can get an overview. I can log in and see the results organization wide, and I can see the changes as our projects get better and better in terms of capability maturity. And so do our programs, and so does our portfolio. Well, what's not to like? You know, if you're in the organization, the type of organization where the people at the top can mandate it and everybody else says, well, that's great, yes, we'll use it. Great, good luck to you. But every organization is different. Every group of individuals is different. We can give you the tools. We can't tell you in every case how to use them. So did that answer your question, or was I rambling?
Yeah, it did answer it. So it's basically how the organization or the business sees it, what are benefits, you know, from the top, like they see in terms of time and cost. A follow-up to that would be what type of industry you're working in. So most of these checklists come from the error troika, you know, countermeasures, and also finding errors like military or aerospace or health industry. But if you apply that to construction or oil and gas, then you're looking at time, right? Every time you do a checklist, you're introducing time, which costs money.
Yeah, I mean, but you know, have a play with one. See how much time it takes. It doesn't take a lot. Trust me. If you're by the time you've eaten half your lunchtime sandwich, you could have filled in 2 or 3 checklists and got the results. So, and you know, if you were going to ask me to sell it to individuals who are working in an environment where their organization is not at all amenable to this type of thing, okay, well, next time you move and you're going for an interview and you get to talk about how you as a project manager have developed, then say, well, you know, I thought I was really good at this, this, and this, but I started doing these checklists and I realized people around me saw things in a different way. So I got them to do the checklists as well, and we worked on it, and I improved the way I apply the good principles of project management. So you know, it's about you as the individual in a whole, not just about you delivering better projects, but also improving your capability, personal capability, and the team's capability and the organization's capability. So there's there's wins for at every level for everybody. And you know, I'm not talking about some sort of major box ticking exercise, some major assurance exercise. I'm talking about a couple of minutes here, a couple of minutes there. And have I done that? Have I done that? You know, do I know where that is? It's not a major overhead.
Well, I think we're probably just about 8 o'clock, so time to wind up. And thank you so much, Adrian, for speaking to us and sharing your knowledge and insights with us today. I'd encourage everyone to register for the framework and explore it. And if we can show our appreciation for Adrian in the normal way.
Thank you very much, everybody. And I hope you'll get something out of it. So there's something in there for everybody, I hope. And I wish you all the very best of luck with all your projects in the future. Thank you.